one fantastic talk after the other. I make no promises that I'm going to continue that trend, but it's been great up until now, so thank you. Even though we just got back from break, I'm going to take it a little bit slow, and I figure I'll tell you what I'm going to tell you before I tell you it. So what I plan to discuss today is going to be what our mission and motivations are at the Whole Health Oncology Institute, the way that we approach the burden of evidence around medical cannabis, and how that is different from sort of the standard approach on clinical outcomes. The research that we published on that and what the receptions to that have been are focused on patient-reported outcomes, or PROs, and then the tools that we built to try to leverage those functions and promote that utility among patients and clinicians. So when it comes down to who we are, the Whole Health Oncology Institute is a health data analytics organization. We focus on cancer care, chronic disease, and phytotherapeutics with a special focus on medical cannabis. I can pretty much guarantee that every single other speaker that you're going to hear this weekend is embarrassingly better than me at any of the details around medical cannabis, either in terms of biochemistry or clinical applications. Where I step in is from the 10-mile-high perspective. I look at large data. I look for big data patterns and systems dynamics to try to find actionable insights within those hidden patterns, within those interactions that are only visible with truly large groups of data. And from that, we're able to piece together both clinical data and patient experiences to be able to come to findings which can improve clinical outcomes and patient interactions with their clinicians overall. As to why we do what we do, our founder Jim put it best with every task, every project should begin with the question, how does this help the patient? And that's something that we try to do with everything that we explore. We don't pursue discovery simply for discovery's sake. We try to find actionable insights, we try to find tools that can be used to improve patient outcomes, prognoses, and quality of life. And the way that we do that, I like to say, is that the whole health approach has to focus on systems, not just symptoms. The way that we approach that is by taking a different perspective on the burden of evidence for medical cannabis. So, as a lot of you are familiar, I'm sure, when you're trying to find what are the public health applications of any given intervention, such as medical cannabis, in this case we've got the actual experts, the subject matter experts, whether it's biochemistry or medical applications, and then on the other end, you have the consensus of the medical community. And in the middle, the two of those come together to figure out how to implement the best ideas. That's how it's supposed to work. I don't need to tell you that that's not currently how it works, because there's an artificial pressure, a filter in the form of federal restrictions, whether that is in the form of fear of losing access to grants, limited access to medical cannabis that can be used in clinical trials, or the simple pressure on institutions out of fear of running foul of one agency or the other. And that cuts off one half of this form, so that you have the subject matter experts, the people in this room who know exactly what medical cannabis is capable of. They've seen it firsthand, they've seen it in the tests, they've seen it in the patients. And yet for some reason it's difficult to get traction because it has been hard to find a consensus, an overall agreement on the side of the medical community. And so that leads to the problem of what do we do about the public health role of medical cannabis? How do we figure that out? How do we overcome the barrier of the medical consensus with federal restrictions in place? The way that we approach that is, again, from a dynamic systems perspective. So one of the simplest ways that we started approaching it was by mapping out the cannabinoids. And simply through research, anything that we could tie through clinical results, individual cannabinoids with all of the different health benefits that have been mapped to those cannabinoids. We can see CBD has a host of benefits associated with it. THC's got a whole other host of benefits associated with that. There's some intersections and overlap in between where there's some unique ones. But where we start to find interesting event is when you don't pick one or two isolates, but when you take the full spectrum. And this is one of the reasons why so many people refer to full plant medicine or full spectrum cannabis as being so essential in developing the so-called entourage effect. Because when you have a true high-level systems perspective on how cannabis works and what these interactions can be, then we start to understand that this is not something you can approach with a reductionist mindset. You can't approach cannabis as, well, what is the one functional component? There isn't a functional component. The entire organism is linked with its interactions with the endocannabinoid system as part of a complex adaptive system. And until we approach it that way, we're not going to be able to fully map the effects of medical cannabis. Now, one of the ways that we started trying to do that was creating a massive database. Every one of these dots represents a collection of data. In this case, on various forms and applications of medical cannabis. Then we have the second collection that is built in here that maps out the subjects or the demographics that we're looking at. It's patients, animals, in vivo. Then we have also the modalities. So we can take a look at what is the form that it was ingested by. Was it going to be capsules, edibles, smoked, vaporized? Up top, we have the measures and metrics. So everything from biomarkers to disease states to overall symptom management. And then obviously, in order to be thorough, we would always have to include any adverse events or effects, side effect symptoms. All of these are really interesting collections in and of themselves. But in and of themselves, that's what they are, by themselves. It's when we combine them and we look for the intersections between all of these different collections of data that we start to find insights that point to unique patterns that allow us to start to discover where are the intersections and the gaps in medical cannabis research. And again, it is only by taking a look at the broadest picture of medical cannabis in terms of science, in terms of patient outcomes, that we're able to get an idea for what is the full range of potential impact and application. When we started developing this methodology, the idea was, okay, well that's great. Let's apply this to the largest collection of homogenized medical cannabis studies that we can find. Let's get a big block of medical cannabis studies with a solid set of analytics behind it. And as I'm sure a lot of you realize, that didn't exist. So we looked and everything was too heterogeneous, or used 100 different metrics, or was using wildly different forms of cannabis or metrics or populations. We couldn't find a single block to be able to tie it all together. We're strong believers that if you need something done and nobody's done it, then it's on you to do it. So we conducted the largest yet meta-analysis of medical cannabis. We put together over 10,000 peer-reviewed studies and built a custom machine learning algorithm to be able to analyze them, to be able to look at the medical sentiment analysis of these studies, focusing not just on the conclusions, because, as I mentioned, there is an artificial pressure, unfortunately, on many of these studies to be careful about what they say in their conclusions, or to couch it in language that is going to be able to pass muster without upsetting anybody at certain levels, even if the data says something contradictory to that. So in addition, we did factor it in, but in addition to the conclusions, we also mapped what were the metrics that were explored in the study, and what were the results of those metrics. How effective was cannabis at the individual metrics that were reported in each study? And what we found was really something surprising, I have to say. If I can get this, but there we go. So when we aggregated all of the sentiment across the board, we found it overwhelmingly supportive of medical cannabis across all studies, with 64% of all studies showing medical cannabis was effective, only 30% showing that they didn't recommend its use. When we look across all topics, from tumor growth, pain, nausea, appetite, inflammation, in nearly every metric, medical cannabis was indicated. Cancer dynamics in terms of tumor growth and anti-carcinogenesis. Again, medical cannabis was shown to be indicated. As a supplement or complement to standard of care, again, medical cannabis was found to be more effective than any of the measures compared against it. And then finally, this is my particular area of affection because of my background studying inflammation. In the world of biomarkers, we especially found a huge support for medical cannabis across a wide range of inflammatory markers. And this is something that's really important, I feel, because these are markers that can be cross-referenced and applied to a wide range of other applications. This isn't simply just one demographic or one population or one subject. These are markers that can be cross-referenced in any clinical trial, that can be measured within any population. And being able to have a benchmark for that, to see what is the standard within this world, is critical. The way that we leveraged that information was, again, applying numerous different axes to it to try to find out not only how frequently were positive effects reported, but how strong were those effects, and be able to map that out on an evidence map axis. And as you can see, pretty much everything is pointed in one direction, towards common and towards effective. And with the greatest results showing general therapeutic use, meaning improved overall quality of life, but also in terms of cancer care, pain, inflammation, quality of life, overwhelming strength of evidence across over 10,000 studies. This was information we were really excited about, and we were very proud to put out. But that being said, I'm used to publishing research. I'm not used to anybody actually reading that research. And that was a different experience here, because we seemed to strike a nerve. And within a short amount of time, we found ourselves in the top 1/10 of 1% of the most read research of the past 30 years. And the benefit, I feel, to that is the fact that it's shown a light on a topic that's too many organizations have been very shy about exploring, which is the utility and the power of cannabis for cancer care. Too many people have been afraid to use something like cannabis and cancer in the same sentence, because cancer is too serious of a subject for cannabis. And after all, what is cannabis? It's not just, it's palliative care, it's maybe quality of life or mood alteration. It doesn't have a physiological effect. Obviously, everybody in this room knows otherwise, but that's been the status quo for too long, is you can't talk about cancer and cannabis. Frontiers in Oncology was the journal that we published in. We very nearly didn't publish in them because they ran us through the ringer. They were scared witless to publish this study. And they ran us through twice the regular number of peer reviewing and editorial cycles until they finally felt comfortable. Okay, now all of the numbers are steady, everything is safe, it all checks out. We don't have a reason not to publish this. But they didn't want to do something this big on cannabis and cancer. That changed once this came out and they saw the kind of traction it got. And Frontiers in Oncology came back to us and said, we think that you're onto something here, and we would like you to actually guest edit a special issue of Frontiers in Oncology, specifically focused on cannabinoids and homeostasis. And that's honestly why I'm standing here in front of you right now, because that's what we're doing. We're sharing, curating, and collecting this entire body of work to be able to build a platform where people can publish material in a safe, reaffirming environment on topics that normally don't get top-tier publication attention. To be able to discuss the power of medical cannabis and cancer and homeostatic adjustments, to be able to look at inflammatory markers, to be able to look at all the physiological and regulatory effects that cannabis can have, and be able to put that into the context of the overall picture of homeostasis, cancer, and quality of life. And that's something that we're working in conjunction with the Institute of Cannabis Research to be able to put together and build a coalition, to be able to work with anybody and everybody that's trying to move this project forward, and trying to publish material to advance that conversation. So I've been talking a lot about medical research and peer-reviewed research, but the other thing that we really focus on are patient-reported outcomes. So all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the evidence pyramid. You know, case studies, randomized clinical trials, systematic reviews. The thing that's missing from this, though, is the patient. And that's where we have the patient experience. This is not in replacement of the evidence pyramid, but in complement to it. Because the patient experience has too often been rejected as mere anecdote. It doesn't have to be. A patient experience can be standardized and validated in the same way that a doctor's report can be. You can run it through the same sort of regimentation and careful vetting to be able to pull out qualified and quantified information, to be able to come up with validated surveys, to be able to apply the subjective experience of mental health and pain and quality of life, to be able to work with long-term outcomes, the type of longitudinal results that are nearly impossible to get through RCTs, especially with something like cannabis, where it could be 10, 20 years of quality of life measurements. To be able to provide tools for patients and clinicians to work together on cooperating on interpretation of biomarkers, on patient-reported outcomes and electronic health record coming together. And all of that information can be used to analyze and discover prevalence rates for disease and treatments, and most importantly, efficacy rates for these interventions. To be able to find out how effective is it, when is it effective, why is it effective. None of that is possible without incorporating the patient. In order to do that, we use validated measurements of patient experience with cannabis, both in the short and the long term. You have to treat patients as an integrated part of their own care plan. Patients are responsible for far more of their own health than their doctors will ever be. They have to be involved in that process. So the tools that we built to try to leverage this are in two different organizations. One is the Home Health Oncology Institute, which I'm the president of. The other is Eric Cancer Playbook, where I'm the director of research. Eric Cancer Playbook is a nonprofit, whereas WHOI is a for-profit data company. Excuse me. WHOI focuses on health data information. We have a clinician-based platform which allows clinicians to be able to find patient-reported outcomes, research collections, huge swaths of evidence and experience based on medical cannabis. And they can gather and collate that into collections that they can save to their own accounts, or they can share with their colleagues, their patients, what have you. The feature that we're really excited about is something we're calling the Pro Hub, our patient-reported outcome hub. And this allows people to put together customized patient-reported outcome measures, to be able to build their own standardized and validated surveys, combining any collection of measures that they want. Whether, let's say, I want these metrics from patient information, I want sleep disturbance and fatigue from symptom assessment, I want longitudinal trends and analysis, and let's go ahead and throw in a PHQ-9 as a bonus. And that will all be formed automatically into their own custom collection. A patient portal will be created that clinician is able to track, follow, and study in real time. And that's something that we're really excited about, because not only does that give the clinicians additional tools, but that also gathers more data so that the next round of people will also have more effective and accurate information. Because the clinicians can cross-reference their own information against the findings of the previous round of patient-reported outcomes. I'm going to have to run through some of this really quickly. These are some of the forms that we see, how you can set it up on the back end versus how it shows up to the patients. Now when it comes to Cancer Playbook and Team Eric, really quickly, the function that we use is play-by-play. This is, rather than clinician-focused, this is patient-focused. So patients can log on to the system, ericcancerplaybook.org. They can log their symptoms, their disease types. We will then check that against all of the research and pros that are out there, share with the patient those insights, show them how other patients have used their own approaches for their own care plans, and help empower and educate them for how they're going to take care of themselves. These programs don't exist as a vacuum. They require engagement within the community, especially in the lack of federal support. And finally, I don't want to use the D word. I will simply say this link, or this QR code right here, will bring up a calculator program, which, yes, if you want to donate to Eric Cancer Clinic, that's great. But more importantly, it has a formulation to be able to track and measure the impact of education on patient lives and disability-adjusted life years, so that you can see exactly what kind of an impact reaching any given number of patients is going to have on the engagement, on their understanding, on their adoption of that information, and how that's going to impact their overall, not just lifespan, but health span. Thank you very much.